Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy Nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hi, it's Jennifer Rogers Markwell with Platinum Talks Wealth. Today we're joined by Chantel Laughlin. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
Hi, so I am a mindset coach for women. My goal is to empower women to make them feel deserving and create a stress-free relationship around their finances.
You've had a lot of unique paths behind the scenes, and some of which folks could say would be maybe taboo to a certain extent. Would you be open to sharing some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what actually kind of prompted me into this field was that I started a custom casket business, and we had a few deaths in the family, and I saw that people are really taken advantage of, and the industry is just really monopolized. It's also really bad for the environment. So there are several smaller companies that are really doing great things, and I wanted to kind of bring that to the masses. However, I came along a lot of internal struggles, limiting beliefs, and I had never worked through my own money issues. And so that made it really challenging for me to grow a business confidently and really approach sales with confidence. So I started learning about financial literacy and really like the money story that you tell yourself and has been told to you your whole life and how impactful that is.
So when it comes to money memories, if you're open to sharing, where kind of was that for you that you came across that moment that you're like, oh, hey, my feelings and my relationship with money are maybe tied to this point in time?
So no matter how much money I made, I was pretty much always broke. I didn't know how to live within my means. And that kind of goes back to my childhood where money was always kind of this like mystical thing. My stepfather was wealthy. My regular father was not. And money was used to kind of manipulate me and used as this like tool that was only accessible if I was behaving a certain way. And so I developed a really complicated relationship around it. And by all intents and purposes, pretty toxic. If I was describing it as like a relationship with a person, it would be a toxic relationship and somewhat abusive. So there's just a lot of intense emotions tied to money that I kind of had to start sorting through to be able to move forward in being an entrepreneur, but also just being a like successful human.
Where was your pinpoint? Was there a pivotal moment that really pinpointed your thought of saying, oh, hey, here's kind of where the switch clicked from this specific moment in time?
There were a couple people that I followed online who were talking about their story, and I just resonated so intensely with that. And I was also doing personal development work myself. And so I had kind of been keeping all of this under wraps. And then, you get to a certain age and you just kind of have one of those epiphanies. You're like, oh my gosh, everything I'm doing is of my own volition. Like there are causes, but I am keeping this ball rolling and I can stop this. And so diving into the whys of the money story, like what are the beliefs that have been told to me about money, and how has it been used in a good way and a bad way for me, and really figuring out what emotions those were tied to inside of myself. So I don't know if there's a specific moment, but just kind of like a period of time.
If you're open to sharing too, what are some of the moments when you realize money wasn't being utilized as a tool and it was more kind of being used against you to a point? So I'd imagine your mindset was not having a positive, embracing, moment with money. It was, hey, it was a manipulative thing. So how did you kind of move through that as well?
Well, learning to recognize my triggers. So a lot of it for me was tied to men, which is why I focus so heavily on women. My relationships with men have always been kind of, um, I've felt like they needed to provide, even though they didn't, and they had no obligation to. But because money was used like that with me when I was growing up, or modeled for me that way, I had been replicating that. And so I was relying on people that I should have never relied upon and didn't deserve to be relied upon. And so that noticing those patterns was huge for me.
And I feel like a lot of women, I mean, go through that. I mean, talking with clients and hearing stories, there's a lot of kind of the old school philosophy, like the male is the provider in the relationship. And that's the stereotypical kind of, household we need to live in with that white picket fence, hypothetically, right? So there's definitely the shift that's happening. And you're probably seeing this of the whole, a man is not my financial plan.
Exactly. And it was really confusing because I've always been a pretty independent, like empowered person on the other side of that. So internally, it just felt there was a lot of strife and just a lot of confusion about how to deal with that. And so it took a lot of repeating the same cycle until I really just got sick of myself. Like, you cannot keep doing this. You have to change, for me to figure out that there is a different way. You can heal these wounds. You can start making new choices, and you can learn to feel deserving of that. And once you start feeling deserving of it, it brings your whole nervous system a different kind of peace and calm. Well, once you start recognizing it, that's the biggest component. People they like to they just like to keep their head in the sand, like comfort zone is there to protect you, but it's not always the best thing for you. Approaching the topic without shame and without guilt and being really compassionate towards yourself, I think are three really important things, because you can harp on yourself and, repeating these cycles, but you didn't know any better. And so once you start noticing it, you can start taking action to kind of rejecting this cycle. And once you start rejecting the cycle, then you can begin to kind of rewire your brain to move along a different path.
So kind of tying into that too, do you find that money infidelities are also a big factor and when you're having conversations with folks? And I feel like the word infidelity is like such a big, hairy, scary word, right? It could be something little as like, hey, I bought another pair of shoes that I didn't need, but I'm hiding them from my partner. Or I have, a separate family that I'm providing for, or that my original family doesn't know. I mean, it could be as deep or not as deep, but have you found that infidelities are also something that's raw kind of in the moment of folks kind of feeling their way through?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, it can run the gamut of small to large. I mean, for me growing up, there was a lot of like my mom was really willing to help and wanted to help, but because my stepfather didn't want that, like he wasn't open to those things, there was a lot of mismatched energy there. And so I kind of replicated that in the future, or not in the future, in my current life, but it was more with myself. Like I wasn't being truthful to myself about where I was. And I was always living outside my means. I was ignoring debt. I never took ownership of really any of my finances. It's like, oh, I'll just figure it out one day, or someone else will figure it out one day. Someone will save me. And so for me personally, that's how it was. Now, I've had clients who have been in relationships where it is not like it's not broken down 50-50, and they feel like they have to hide things they're buying. One of my clients had to hide the amount that she was actually paying for daycare because her husband at the time wouldn't have approved it. And so there was a lot of guilt, and it created a lot of tension in their relationship. And ultimately, for many different reasons, they ended up getting divorced. But the level of communication and shame around money just is so confusingly tied together that I think it's hard for people to see through.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because I feel like there's such a raw vulnerability with money, right? In relationships, if you're coming into a relationship where, you're older coming in, maybe you're more established, or even the folks that are coming in together and kind of growing together, it's just
Mhm.
kind of that raw vulnerability that many folks psychologically just aren't open to sharing.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, when I meet new clients or prospective new clients now, and I kind of jump right into the nitty gritty about the emotional side of things. And a lot of people they're not super receptive of that at first. And it takes some time for them to warm up to the idea of money being a very emotional thing, and learning how to regulate their emotions around it.
And that goes to some of the taboo topics that you and I have, kind of talked through before, right? I find that's fascinating because as I shared, I was brought up with my grandparents, right? You didn't talk about, money. You didn't talk about sex. You didn't talk about politics. You didn't talk about religion. Those were just things you didn't talk about. And I feel like many of those are very important to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I've said shame, I feel like so many times in this podcast already, but there is just a deep rooted shame that surrounds all of those topics, like the sex, the death, the money, because they've been hidden away so long. And so everybody has this idea of how they should be, instead of just communicating freely about what you think and how you feel about it. And really, it just breaks down to communication and being able to relate to someone through an uncomfortable conversation. I usually have to be the one to break the ice with like a personal anecdote and be lighthearted about it, but still sincere. Um, because when people can see someone else approaching something without shame and with comfort and with ease, it gives them the opportunity, almost the permission, to be able to approach it the same way. Now, some people are just not receptive to it. Like they're just not there yet. And that's totally okay. Like you have to meet people where they're at. And if that's not where they're at, and they may never be there, and that's okay too.
Just looking back on money in general, I mean, I think everybody's made mistakes along the way, right? No one has this perfected for the most part. I mean, you think back to moments with, college, or, when you're younger, and credit cards and debt. And I mean, that it kind of snowballs to a certain extent, but I feel like those are really life lessons that we can learn and kind of share along the way to encourage others maybe not to make the same mistakes that we've made.
Absolutely. Yeah. My first, I think I shared this with you before. that my first credit card, or when I turned 18, I immediately went and got a Target card and like a Visa card. I maxed them out. Then I went to college, so they didn't have my address. And then I moved again. So they just never had my address to send these bills. And I didn't think a single thing about it. I didn't understand the implications. I didn't even understand like really the interest or anything about that. And had no idea the detriment it was doing to me until the market crashed in 2008 and it had finally all caught up to me and I didn't have another way to get out because the banks weren't lending money then and it was just really tough to build good credit when you've sabotaged your credit. So the financial literacy aspect is just so huge. So
Going through budgeting, teaching people what credit cards are and to get out of debt, to pay that off. And here's your interest rate you're paying. I feel like finance could be such a foreign land and such a foreign language in essence to a lot of folks that are like, wait a minute, but I got 15% off, or in college, I got a free bag of candy or beer or a t-shirt or whatever that was back in the day, right? You had no understanding of, wow, there's an aftermath that can come with this if you're not being responsible. But what does responsible mean?
yeah, I mean, it's a shame it's not taught more to younger kids. And I think it is now more days because YouTube and the internet and things are just so much more readily available. But yeah, I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, I think most of us did. I don't know anybody that wasn't younger and made some silly mistakes in college with getting a credit card or, you know what I mean? Like unfortunately, it's much more common of a conversation than it is not these days. And the younger generation, I feel like does have a better chance to have, more education out there. Not to date myself, but it wasn't like you could Google something back in the day, right? Like Google hasn't been around forever, but it's definitely a great tool to educate yourself on, especially when you're willing to educate yourself. So it's not like, hey, here's a credit card and here it is. I mean, like you said, it doesn't necessarily follow you, but then it really does behind the scenes.
Yeah, it does. And it impacts so many things that you just have no idea about. I mean, yeah,
Your credit score, buying a house, like buying a car, what your interest rate is tied to it. I mean, there's so many facets that when you sign up for that original card, like, do you realize the aftermath and really truly what being responsible means?
yeah, I definitely didn't. And so that is, and a lot of the women I work with, they didn't either. And
Right.
still some people just, if they still are making these mistakes, they don't know. And better late than never, but
Totally.
got to learn it.
And that's, why I feel like financial literacy is so, so important and so needed, right? Across the board for everyone. And I feel as the wealth transfer is changing and really leaning into women, quite frankly, much more. There couldn't be a more important time.
I agree. I'm with you.
Well, before we wrap things up, I would love to know any tips or tricks. Everybody seems to have them of how they save money, or it could be, I'm shopping this day at a grocery store. I'm shopping online for fantastic, used jeans, whatever that looks like. What are some tips or tricks that you're open to sharing?
So I'll give you a couple. My first one is deprivation is not the answer. First and foremost, when you try and deprive yourself of something, it's all you can think about and you're going to end up spending your money on it anyway. So you need to figure out a better way to buy it or a way that you can reduce the amount you're spending in another area to be able to buy whatever that thing is. The second tip is the easy way to budget is to split it and forget it. Some people say split it before you get it. Some, you can approach your HR, and I like to tell people to have 4 accounts. So you have 2 spending and then you have 2 saving. You have your bills and then you have your just your spending, your groceries and things like that. And then you have your emergency fund and then your financial goals. But some HRs will let you break down all 4 categories and they'll totally split it for you before you even get your check. Not all businesses will do that. Or if you're an entrepreneur, that becomes a little more difficult. But you can always go to your bank after the fact and say how you want your money designated. So you don't even have the option to blow it all on a new Vitamix or whatever it might be.
I think that's a good call. And one point I'll piggyback on that too is you can name your accounts, right? You could say, hey, this is for my vacation fund. This is my emergency money. This is my, again, if you're an entrepreneur, you're doing quarterly taxes. This is my tax money account, as painful as that can be, right? You can name them different things so they're earmarked and you know exactly what they are and where they're at. We talk about consolidation a lot, making sure that you know where things are, that, Lord forbid if something were to happen to you, it'd be easy to go to, a relationship that you had saying, hey, here's what happened. And then you don't have to kind of scurry and say, oh gosh, where was this at? What's happening? So things to think about. And I think going back to that emergency money is so important to have on the sidelines, right? If things hit the fan in your world, that's your first line of defense that you go into. And some people earmark you need to have at least 3 months. Some say 6 months. Some say a year, depending on what your comfort level is. And quite frankly, what you do and what your expenses look like.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it depends upon your industry also, because some, like the first person I heard talk about that, they were referring to their mother and how she's a nurse and she became unemployed, but she had job offers before she even was officially let go. But if you're an artist or something of that nature, it might be challenging to find, another income. So I think that really depends.
It also depends on, I think, proximity. Where do you live? Are you in a small community that only has X amount of jobs in your field that you're in? Is it going to be something where you've got to move for and then you want to plan accordingly the best you can with that emergency money?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thank you so much for spending some time with us and sharing. And for those of you that are listening or watching, appreciate your time with us. And we hope that you'll join us again on our next Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.